Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, I thought that I would make a short little video on Jermall Charlo and overall why the LDBC in New Media has not been talking about him lately, which I find very interesting. So, for those of you guys that have watched my channel recently, I've released a couple of videos on Jermall Charlo. One about a week and a half ago, where I talked about the Jermall Charlo David Benavidez situation. And then one, I believe, sometime last week, probably midway through the week, where it was announced, the Showtime schedule was announced, where Jermall Charlo, his next fight was announced to be against a fighter by the name of Juan Macias Montiel. And a certain amount of people don't even know this guy, and I can't blame them, because I cannot really remember any fights that I've seen Juan Macias Montiel in. Here's the problem that I have. Once again, I review a certain amount of videos and little clips, sometimes by the LDBC in New Media, to once again put a logical and objective spin on things, because we all know that they're not logical and objective, even though they claim to be. They claim to speak all facts. They claim to speak nothing but the truth. And one thing we know that they love to do is allege certain fighters avoid these American black fighters because they have a very pro-racial agenda. So one of the fighters that they've been trying to push for the past several years has been a Jermall Charlo. That's been one of the fighters that they've been trying to push. Well, once again, I've been saying this about Jermall Charlo for a very long time. And let's take a look at the recent contenders that he has fought in that division. Once again, the first fight that he fought there was Jorge Sebastian Highland, then Hugo Centeno Jr., then Matt Korobov, Brandon Adams, Dennis Hogan, and Sergey Dervyachenko. None of these fighters are A-class fighters. And don't sit here and tell me that Jermall Charlo cannot possibly get an A-class fight. Demetrius Andrade asked for him to sign with DAZN and possibly fight him. He declined. Jermall Charlo is not interested in a Demetrius Andrade fight. But there's been a recent fighter that recently called him out by the name of David Benavidez so he can move up to 168. And Jermall Charlo apparently about a year ago said that he would go up to 168 and knock David Benavidez out. But once again, like I've always said about Jermall Charlo, what the LDBC and New Media say is that, oh, Jermall Charlo, he's all about the smoke. It's lions only. But really what Jermall Charlo is, and I'm going to have to see if Demetrius Andrade does the same way when he moves up to 168, but we'll see what happens, because I'm not really 100% sure how serious Demetrius Andrade is in getting some of these big fights either. But one thing I will say is this: he's at least made at least some better moves than a Jermall Charlo, or at least tried to. Jermall Charlo is not interested in any of these top contenders. Any of them. The ones that are in their prime. What Jermall Charlo does is he talks a lot of trash on these fighters, like David Benavidez and Gennady Golovkin and Canelo Alvarez, Demetrius Andrade, but when it comes to actually fighting them, he is not willing to fight them. And when they finally call him out on his bluff and finally try to get him a fight, he's not going to accept it. All of a sudden he becomes very quiet or passive aggressive. That's what Jermall Charlo always does. Once again, the LDBC and New Media, they love to allege just because certain fighters of theirs, certain favorite fighters of theirs, call out certain fighters, that, oh, we got to give them a lot of credit. You know, they're willing to face a lot of these top contenders. You always have to trust someone's actions over their words. And what Jermall Charlo's actions tells us is that he is not serious about facing these top contenders. That is the bottom line. Let's take a look at Montiel's record. Once again, I showed it on the video that I did last week. He's 22-4, and not too long ago, he lost to Yami Munguia by knockout. Now, he does seem like a decently strong opponent. He does seem okay, but if you've seen him fight, he's nothing special. But this is really where the big question comes in. Where is New Media? Where is Aki TV? Where is Dante's Boxing Nation? Where is Boxing Ego? Where are these LDBC and New Media channels? You know, the ones that allege that Canelo Alvarez and Teofimo Lopez and Gennady Golovkin and Vasyl Lomachenko, the ones that always love to allege when Latino fighters and Caucasian fighters might be ducking a certain opponent. Where are they when a fighter like a Jermall Charlo is clearly avoiding a certain amount of the top contenders? Where are these individual videos that they're eventually going to post about Jermall Charlo? Where is Dante's Boxing Nation? Where is Aki TV? Where is Boxing Ego? Well, we're not going to see any videos by them because once again, and this is to prove it once again, They have a very pro-racial agenda. So I just thought that I would do a short video on that because it is very clear that Jermall Charlo is not serious about facing a lot of these top contenders. And I don't want to hear from any of the Jermall Charlo fans that Jermall Charlo is being ducked by everybody. Because he is not. He is not serious about facing any of these top contenders. He may claim that he is. Just because a person calls out certain fighters does not mean that they are serious. Once again, when certain fighters have called Jermall Charlo out on his bluff, he becomes a dog with his tail in between his legs. He is not serious, okay? That's the bottom line. But I just found it interesting because I have not seen any videos from Aki TV. I have not seen any videos from Dante's Boxing Nation. I have not seen any videos from Boxing Ego. Where are our objective and logical heroes? We need them to come out with these logical videos because, as we all know, the LDBC New Media, they're about as logical as you can get, according to them. But anyways, on a real note, you're not going to see any videos from them because, once again, they are pro-racial. So it is what it is. I just found that hilarious. But that's the bottom line. That's pretty much it for this video. Now, a fighter that a certain amount of people might actually wonder on my channel as well, because they'll say, well, I haven't seen you really criticize other fighters like Teofimo Lopez or a certain amount of other fighters that might be potentially ducking, a Devin Haney or something like that. Well, let me tell you this. If Teofimo Lopez, after his next fight, I believe against a very talented fighter, Australian fighter, up-and-coming fighter, who's on a pretty good streak right now, I want to see Teofimo's move after that fight. And if he still refuses to fight a Devin Haney, I certainly am going to be on his ass just like I was on Jermall Charlo's. This is a logical and objective channel, and I give everyone a fair shake. You can expect that from me at all times. And if Teofimo Lopez refuses to fight a Devin Haney, I certainly will be on him. Now, Canelo Alvarez, a certain amount of people may wonder why I don't get on him, even though a certain amount of people believe that he ducks and avoids certain fighters. Here's the thing about Canelo. You can allege that Canelo Alvarez is avoiding a certain amount of these fighters. And do I believe that Canelo Alvarez has expressed a whole lot of interest in facing some fighters? There's some fighters where I do think that Canelo maybe has maneuvered around. Maybe a Demetrius Andrade. Maybe even some would say a Jermall Charlo. But I believe that he offered Jermall Charlo that contract and Jermall Charlo turned it down. That's what I truly believe. Now, the Demetrius Andrade one is a little bit different. But what those boys are going to have to do is that they're going to have to go up probably to 168 and maybe face a potential David Benavidez. Whoever were to get that fight first, I think, has a very decent chance at getting a shot at Canelo Alvarez. Because there's going to be a lot of pressure on Canelo Alvarez to face David Benavidez because they're both of Mexican descent. There's going to be a lot of pressure on him. So if one of those guys can get to David Benavidez before one or the other, and beat David Benavidez, especially in impressive fashion, or just beat him, in general, I think that could give them a very good shot at beating Canelo. Once again, a certain amount of people want to criticize Canelo. And do I agree with him facing an Ildrim? No. I think that Ildrim was a C-class fighter. But the problem is that the majority of people are not going to see a problem with what Canelo Alvarez is doing. And to be honest with you, I don't really see a problem with what he's doing in the year 2021 because he is basically fighting fighters that are A-class fighters and pretty much on the same level as a Jermall Charlo and a Demetrius Andrade. And a certain amount of people, especially the LDBC in New Media, would not agree with that. But when you take a look at Billy Joe Saunders, Callum Smith, even a Sergey Kovalev at that point in time in his career, these are fighters that are looked at by the majority of people as just as big of threats or on the same level in terms of talent, even at that point in time in their careers, as a Demetrius Andrade, as a Jermall Charlo. Whether you disagree or agree with that, they're somewhere along the same pack. So what Demetrius Andrade and Jermall Charlo need to do if they want to get a Canelo Alvarez fight, and I'm not saying that they would not deserve a shot over Ildrim or some of these other fighters that Canelo is facing. That's not what I'm saying. But if they want a shot, you cannot fight fighters like a Juan Macias Montiel. What Demetrius Andrade and Jermall Charlo should be doing next is trying to go after a David Benavidez. Apparently, David Benavidez is willing to take on all comers. And I don't want to hear this bullshit excuse from Charlo or Demetrius Andrade, which I've heard from both of them, that, well, I just want to fight all the belt holders. It ain't going to work like that. Sometimes you got to face some of these bigger names in order to get the biggest fight of them all. That's what you're going to have to do. And if I hear Jermall Charlo and Demetrius Andrade say that they don't want to face David Benavidez or some of these other fighters because they're not a belt holder, I'm sorry, but to me that's nothing but an excuse. David Benavidez appears to be willing to fight on all comers. I should see Jermall Charlo, at least by next year, wanting to fight a David Benavidez, and I should see the same thing from Demetrius Andrade. So once again, we're going to see. I already know Jermall Charlo is not serious about taking these big fights, even though New Media and the LDBC, they're not going to report on it. But I want to see how serious Demetrius Andrade is. Because one thing I'll give Andrade credit for, it seems like he has at least tried to get a couple of big fights, and they have eluded him, even though I think he could be calling out other certain fighters that he hasn't. But a fighter that he really should be trying to go after, if he is moving up to 168 pounds, is a David Benavidez. I think that really is the key to potentially getting a Canelo Alvarez fight. So we'll see what happens. And if those fights were to happen, and if Demetrius Andrade and Jermall Charlo were to beat David Benavidez, and Canelo still does not fight them, then we can say that Canelo Alvarez is avoiding a Jermall Charlo or a Demetrius Andrade with 100% certainty. And that is pretty much my opinion on the situation. But anyways, thank you all so much for watching. Let me know what you think of this fight. I'm pretty sure I know the majority of opinions on this fight. We'll see what happens. I don't really see this as a big fight at all. But New Media and the LDBC really have tried to sweep this news under the rug, which I have just found very hilarious. But once again, keep an eye out for those channels. I'm betting you money you're not going to see them release any news, any individual videos of Jermall Charlo picking this guy, which really all it is a cherry pick. That's all it is. But it is what it is. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.